was just pulling out my chair when Rebecca's heel slammed into it, sliding it out from under me. "Go to the kitchen," she said. "Adopted children don't eat with a real family." Forks paused. Then laughter, sharp, cruel, echoing. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I walked back to my purse, pulled out the thick envelope I'd kept hidden for weeks, and laid it right in the center of the table. "Mom and Dad left me this," I said quietly. "Call your lawyers. We'll finish this tomorrow." And the way every smile died in that room, that wasn't even the real beginning. Hi, I'm Leah Morgan, and for most of my life, I tried to convince myself that being the adopted child in the Morgan family didn't matter. Harold and Miriam, my parents, never made me feel different. But their 3 biological children, Rebecca, John, and Natalie, they made sure I never forgot exactly where they thought I belonged. Growing up, the reminders came in small cuts. When family photos were taken, Rebecca, my oldest sister, would angle her body so I barely fit into the frame. Ethan, my brother, would laugh and say things like, "Don't worry, Ela. It's not like anyone will notice you're not one of us." Natalie, my middle sister, perfected the soft, patronizing smile people use when they're being cruel, but pretending they're not. And through all of it, Mom would pull me aside afterward, hold my face gently, and whisper, "You're our daughter in every way that matters." Dad would ruffle my hair, help me with homework, sit through every recital and school ceremony like I was the center of his world. Their love was real, solid, the only thing that made me feel like I belonged in that house. Then came the 6 months that broke me open. When both Mom and Dad fell sick, I moved into their home without hesitation. I slept in stiff hospital chairs, signed stacks of treatments, and bills talked to doctors while my siblings sent half-hearted texts. Adrien, my husband, took care of Ava and Mason at home, telling me, "Do what you need to do. I've got ooze." I will never forget that. Meanwhile, Ethan said he couldn't risk the exposure because of his banking job. Natalie said the twins needed her. Rebecca said she couldn't handle seeing them like that. So, it was me. Just me, every day combing Mom's hair when she could no longer lift her hands, whispering to Dad that everything would be okay, even when I knew it wouldn't. Holding their hands when both of them slipped away within days of each other. And then after the funerals where my siblings suddenly played the roles of devoted children, they made an announcement. Rebecca, with her polished voice and perfect posture, said she wanted to host a family dinner to honor Mom and Dad. She even assigned tasks, Isla. "You handle the cooking. You were always the best at making Mom's recipes." Ethan nodded like it was a business meeting. Natalie added, "And maybe bring those rolls from the bakery near your place." Mom loved those. I should have seen the trap forming, the hushed conversations when I entered a room, the way they acted like I was helpful. Staff, not family, the way they avoided eye contact when I asked what exactly this dinner was for. Still, grief makes you hope for things you shouldn't. I spent 3 days cooking Mom's favorite dishes, choosing a good bottle of wine. I couldn't really afford wearing a dress. She always said, complimented my smile. I told myself maybe this dinner would bring us back together. Maybe loss would soften old wounds. But when I walked into Rebecca's house that night, beautiful, spotless, cold, I felt something in the air, a shift, a quiet tension under the polite greetings, a sense that I wasn't a guest. I was the target. When I stepped farther inside Rebecca's house, a strange stillness settled over me, like walking into a room where everyone had been talking about you just seconds before. The dining table was already set with Mom's old china. The paces Rebecca insisted on keeping after the funeral for sentimental reasons, even though she'd barely visited in those last months. Candles flickered, soft music played, everything looked perfect. Too perfect. "Leela, you're early," Rebecca said, smoothing her blouse as she walked toward me. Her smile was tightly stretched, polished, practiced. I wanted to help set things up. I replied, "You've already done plenty," she said, eyes flicking to the food containers in my hands. "Just put it all in the kitchen. We'll handle the rest." We, not you, not family. Them, as I walked past the dining room, I caught pieces of a conversation, voices low, cut off quickly. Ethan's voice, then Natalie's, then a tense silence thick enough to wade through. And when they reappeared from the hallway seconds later, their expressions were too casual, too smooth. Something wasn't right. I kept replaying the moment I arrived, Ethan barely glancing at me before turning away. Natalie fidgeting with her bracelet, Rebecca's lingering look toward her siblings like she was silently checking whether they were ready. Ready for what? In the kitchen, as I unpacked all the dishes, I'd spent hours preparing. The familiar ache settled into my chest, that ache I'd felt my entire childhood standing outside. Closed doors, hearing laughter from rooms I wasn't invited into, watching holiday photos uploaded online without me. Realizing family traditions were continuing without the adopted one. Sometimes exclusion is so subtle it makes you question your own memory. Other times it walks right up and smirks in your face. As I arranged the serves of Mom's apple cinnamon roast on a platter, a flashback washed over me so vividly I could almost smell the cinnamon from years ago. I was 11, holding a plate of cookies I had baked myself. Rebecca, Ethan, and Natalie were on the porch enjoying the summer evening. I asked if they wanted one. They exchanged glances. Rebecca said, "Sure." But when I walked away, I heard her whisper, "She tries too hard." They laughed just like they laughed tonight. Back in the present, I checked the clock. 15 minutes until dinner. I brushed my hands on my dress, took a breath, and stepped back into the living room where everyone had gathered. Rebecca and Natalie were standing by the window whispering. When they noticed me, their conversation died instantly. Ethan adjusted his sleeves, avoiding my gaze, as if guilt were a physical weight pulling his shoulders down. I tried to break the tension. I brought Mom's apple pie to the one she taught me. Rebecca's smile cut me off. Perfect. You can serve it later. Serve it, not share it. Servi tu. The ma'am, monkasu, that dang loadin. Something in their tone, in their posture, in their carefully constructed politeness, it all felt like a performance, like they were waiting for the right moment to drop whatever they'd been planning. Ava and Mason weren't there to distract me with their chatter. Adrian wasn't there to squeeze my hand and tell me it would be fine. It was just me, surrounded by people who had mastered the art of making me feel like an outsider without ever saying the words aloud. I tried to remind myself why I came. Because I wanted to believe in family. Because I wanted to believe that grief could soften cruelty. Because I had spent 6 months giving everything I had to keep Mom and Dad comfortable in their final days. And maybe that mattered to them, too. But as I sat down carefully, quietly, I saw Rebecca watching me. Not warmly, not like a sister, but like someone checking whether the trap was set properly. I knew then whatever was coming wasn't kindness. Dinner started the way disasters often do. Quietly, politely, with everyone pretending nothing was wrong. Rebecca took the seat at the head of the table, the one Mom used to occupy, and folded her napkin with the same. Ethan poured wine like he was hosting a corporate mixer. Not a family memorial. Natalie kept smoothing her dress, glancing at everyone as if waiting for a signal. I sat at the far end, the seat left open after they'd already arranged themselves. I tried to ignore it. I tried to breathe. For the first 10 minutes, the conversation was harmless. Ethan talked about work, Natalie talked about her twins, Rebecca reminisced about Mom's garden, conveniently living out that she never watered it once. But nothing in that room felt real. Every smile looked stretched. Every story felt rehearsed. I brought out the dishes. I'd spent days preparing Mom's favorites, and Rebecca clapped her hands lightly. "Oh, good, Isla. You can start serving." Serving? Not joining. I swallowed the sting. Of course, as I moved around the table, I noticed how none of them made space for me. Not a single chair shifted. Not a single hand offered to help. I set plates in front of them while they continued their conversations as if I were hired staff. As if this wasn't supposed to be the dinner that honored the two people who loved me more than anything. Halfway through the meal, Ethan cleared his throat in that condescending way he had in high school. "So," he said, "since we're all here, maybe we should talk about the house." Rebecca nodded. "And Mom's jewelry? There are some valuable pieces. We should make a plan," Natalie added. "And the investments, it's best if they stay in the bloodline." My fork froze halfway to my mouth. The bloodline, they said it without shame, without hesitation, just a fact in their minds, a rule of nature. Rebecca leaned forward, voice coated in sweetness. "We just want to be practical, Isla. I'm sure you understand." There were a lot of things I understood in that moment, like how the smiles earlier were bait. The small talk was a setup, the dinner a stage. I put down my fork. "What exactly are you saying?" Natty took a breath, preparing her fake sympathetic tone. "We all know Mom and Dad loved you, Isla, but legally, well, inheritance usually goes to biological children. It's just how families work." "Families?" Ethan nodded. We're not cutting you out. We're just saying the majority should stay where it belongs. Belongs? The room tilted. Something inside me, that last soft hope, snapped cleanly in two. You're serious? I whispered. Rebecca tilted her head, that little smirk she used in childhood slipping through. Don't be dramatic. You can keep sentimental things, a photo or two. But the house? The accounts? It's only fair, that was it. Something in my chest went very still. A quiet so sharp it felt like clarity. I pushed my chair back gently. Ethan raised a brow, confused. Natalie bit her lip. Rebecca's smirk faltered just slightly. I stood up, walked toward the kitchen. They probably thought I was going to cry or retreat or disappear, like they detrained me to do 4 years. Instead, I walked to my purse, slid my hand inside, closed my fingers around the thick envelope. The one Mom pressed into my hand days before she went unconscious. The one Dad signed with shaking hands. The one I'd carried for weeks. Waiting for the moment they showed me exactly who they were. I turned around and walked back into the dining room with a calm I didn't recognize in myself. Rebecca frowned. Leela, where are you? I didn't answer. I stepped to the center of the table, right where Mom's good china sat, and dropped the envelope with a soft, precise thud. The sound sliced through the room. What is that? Ethan asked, voice tightening. I looked each of them in the eye. Mom and Dad left me this letter. I said, call your lawyers. We'll meet tomorrow. Silence. For a moment, nobody breathed. Then it happened. The thing I'd been waiting for without realizing it. Panic, raw, visible, delicious. Ethan's face drained of color. Natalie's fingers curled around her wine glass like she might drop it. Rebecca's smile froze, then cracked. Isla, she whispered. What did you do? I leaned forward slightly. What you made me do? And without another word, I picked up my purse and walked out of the house, leaving their stunned silence behind me like smoke from a fire I had finally set. The next morning, the city felt unnaturally bright, too bright for what I knew was coming. I barely slept replaying last night in my head. The laughter, the insult, the envelope, hitting the china, their faces draining of color. Adrian drove me to the law office, his hand resting on mine the whole way. You don't owe them anything? He said quietly. I know, but a part of me, some soft, stubborn piece, still wished they had chosen differently. The law office sat on a quiet street downtown, tall windows catching the early sun. As we walked inside, my stomach twisted. This was the moment, the one my parents had prepared me for, the one my siblings pretended would never come. The receptionist led us to a long conference room, dark wood table, leather chairs, a wall of framed degrees. And sitting there like they owned the place were Rebecca, Ethan, and Natalie. Ethan's wife, Clara, the corporate law shark, sat beside him, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my car. Natalie's husband, Eric, had a stack of financial spreadsheets in front of him, tapping his pen nervously. Rebecca sat alone, hands clasped tight, knuckles white. None of them looked at my Arthur Sullivan entered. Moments later, our parents' lawyer for over 20 years, grayhair.com voice, an expression that saw more than most people wanted him to. He greeted Adrian, then turned to me. Isla, your mother and father spoke very highly of you, especially toward the end. The sentence landed like a warm hand between my shoulder blades. I nodded, barely holding my composure. Sullivan closed the door, sat at the head of the table, opened a thick folder, and the room fell silent. We are here to review the last will and testament of Harold and Miriam Morgan. Rebecca strained. Ethan folded his hands. Natalie bit her lip. Sullivan looked directly at them before continuing. I understand Ayala presented a letter yesterday. Before we begin, I want to confirm something for the sake of clarity. He reached into the folder and lifted a sealed document. Your parents wrote several private letters before they passed. The one Ela shared was authentic and aligns with the revisions they made 8 months ago. 8 months, right around the time their health began failing. Rebecca spoke first, voice tight. Mr. Sullivan, our parents would never exclude any of us. There must be some confusion. There is no confusion, Hughie said simply. He opened the will. The entirety of the Morgan estate home savings, investments, belongings, and all insured assets is to be inherited by their daughter, Layla Morgan. You could hear a pin drop. Even the hum of the air conditioner seemed to freeze. Sullivan continued reading the legal language, but all I could focus on was the shift. The electric jolt as every eye in that room turned toward me. Not with kindness, not with understanding, but with disbelief so sharp it bordered on fury. Ethan was the first to break. This is ridiculous, he snapped. We're their children. They're biological children. They wouldn't leave everything too. He cut himself off, but the word hung there anyway. To the adopted one, Clara leaned forward. We'd like to review medical records from when these revisions were signed. There may have been diminished capacity. Sullivan raised a hand. Both Harold and Miriam were evaluated and found competent by 2 physicians. Rebecca's voice cracked. No, they wouldn't do this to us. They loved us. They loved all of you, Sullivan said gently, but they told me something very specific. May I share it? He looked at me. I nodded. Sullivan read from a handwritten note in the file. Our children have grown into adults with their own lives, but Ela is the one who never left our side. Not out of obligation, but love. She took care of us when no one else would. We want to give her the security she has always given us. Natalie put her head in her hands. Ethan scoffed. So what? She babysits them for a few months and gets everything. That's insane. I felt something inside me harden, heat pulsing low and steady. 6 months, I said quietly. 6 months of hospitals and paperwork and sleeping in chairs. Where were you? They didn't answer. Sullivan continued. Your parents also added a clause regarding challenges to the will. Ethan leaned forward. What clause? If any beneficiary attempts to contest it, they forfeit any claim to family photos, heirlooms, personal items, keepsakes, or belongings of sentimental value. Everything will instead be donated. The panic was instant. Rebecca's breath hitched. They'd give away Mom's ring, Dad's medals, if a challenge is filed. Sullivan confirmed. Natalie stared at me with red eyes. Layla, you wouldn't let that happen, right? I mean, we grew up together, didn't we? I asked. Because my memories of growing up with you look very different from yours. Ethan slammed his hand on the table. You can't shut us out. This is our legacy. Legacy. My voice stayed calm. You weren't there. Not once. You all had excuses while I was watching them fade away day after day. Eric spoke quietly, almost apologetically. We're struggling financially. Isla, the mortgage. I shook my head. Don't put this on me. Clara leaned in, voice sharp. Legally, we can still argue undue influence. The circumstances. Sullivan closed the folder with a soft final thud. You cannot argue undue influence when the beneficiary wasn't present for the revisions. Isla wasn't even in the building when they made these changes. The shock on their faces, that was the moment the power shifted. Rebecca's voice dropped to a whisper. So, it's really over? No, I said. This part is over. What happens next is up to you. Natalie looked desperate. What do you want from us? I thought about it. Really thought about it. The insults, the exclusion, the years of being treated like a guest, never a daughter, the laughter last night, the way they enjoyed humiliating me. What I wanted was simple. I want peace, I said finally, but I won't negotiate my parents' wishes. They made their choice, and so did you. Ethan stood abruptly. Fine. We'll see if there's any legal leverage. Sullivan cut him off. One more thing. Your parents left a final private message for Ela. He handed me a small envelope. I opened it slowly. Inside was a single line in my mother's handwriting. You were always ours. Now, let us take care of you the way you took care of us. My throat closed, my vision blurred. For the first time since they passed, I let myself feel the weight of their love. Not a burden, but a gift. When I looked up, my siblings were watching me with a mixture of resentment, regret, and something resembling fear. I stood. I'm done here. I walked to the door, my hand closed around the handle. Behind me, Rebecca's voice shook. Ela, wait, please. I paused, but didn't turn around. You told me to go to the kitchen, I said softly, but I'm done eating scraps. I walked out of the room, leaving them exactly where they had put me my whole life behind me. Adrian was waiting in the car when I stepped out of the law office. And the moment I closed the door behind me, the tightness I'd been holding in my chest finally cracked. He reached for my hand without a word. That alone undid me. I leaned into him, letting the tears I'd refused to shed in front of my siblings spill freely. That night, after Ava and Mason were asleep, I told Audrey everything, every line of the will, every reaction, every last attempt they made to claw something back. He listened quietly, then said, they lost you long before they lost the inheritance. The days that followed were messy. Ethan cooled with threats. Natalie showed up twice, crying on my doorstep. Rebecca sent flowers, cards, long messages about miscommunication. But I held the boundary. For the first time in my life, I didn't apologize. I didn't shrink. I forgive you. I told each of them. But forgiveness doesn't rebuild what you destroyed. Weeks later, at a grocery store, I ran into Dana, the social worker, who had helped my parents during their last stretch. She told me about two little girls who'd lost everything. Sisters, 4 and 3, no relatives willing to take them both. Something in me opened. 8 months later, Leah and Hazel came home. And the first night I tucked them in Ava, reading to one Mason, offering his favorite stuffed bear, I realized I had finally built the family I always deserved. 1 year after that dinner, I stood in the doorway of our new home, watching all 4 kids chase each other across the backyard. Ava's laughter, sharp and bright. Mason, pretending to be a superhero, little Leah and Hazel clutching fistfuls of dandelions like treasures. Adrian slipped his arm around my waist. "This," he whispered, "is the real family." And he was right. Blood didn't give me this life. Love did. Choice did. Courage did. If you've ever been pushed aside by the people who should have protected you, you're not alone. Share your story below and hit subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. Because sometimes silence isn't weakness. It's justice wrapped in grace. Silent revenge.